Hi, I'm Mandy Bayrami from All Lit Up, and I'm delighted to be here today with debut poet Therese Estacion, whose first collection, Phantompains, from Book Hug Press, is coming out later this month on March 31st. Therese is a Toronto based poet who's part of the Visayan diaspora community. She spent her childhood between Cebu and Giluhan, two distinct islands found in the archipelago, named by the colonizers as the Philippines, before she moved to Canada with her family at 10 years old. She is an elementary school teacher and is currently studying to be a psychotherapist. Therese is also a bilateral below knee and partial hands amputee and identifies as a person with a disability. Her poems have been published in CV2 and Pank magazine and shortlisted for the Marina Namat Award. Phantompains is her first book. Thanks, Therese, for being here with us today and taking the time to speak with us. First off, congratulations on your debut collection. You must be so looking forward to the book birthday later this month.
Mhm.
Can you tell our readers a little bit about Phantompains and how the book came to be?
Sure. So the book Phantompains seems to have three different types of poems. The first part contains Filipino cautionary tales that were told to me as a child, and I refragmented those tales to incorporate my experiences as a bilateral amputee. It also contains poems regarding grief and mourning, and then there are a lot of I mean a lot of the reason why I write is to attempt to piece together what had happened to me and preserve sort of um, my memory in some way. So that theme is also woven into my book. Um, but the overall theme, I'd have to say, though, would probably be that of home. I didn't know this at the time, but I was writing about how far away I was from home, from my former able body, which was my former home, my childhood in the Philippines, and also my repressed memories and feelings. So through the collection, I try to retrace my steps back to the beginning or source somehow.
And you do a really beautiful job of reflecting that experience of home and also the emotional experience in your poems. Like I, as a reader, I really felt the speakers, this world of pain, this rage, and suffering. But again, those that experience of the familial history and the tracing of roots was really powerful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to talk a little further about your work, in the book, you explore disability and
Mm-hmm.
trauma and recovery that's informed by your own experience as not a person who was born with a disability, but who became so in her 30s. Can you speak a little bit about how the physical transformation has changed your art?
Um, you know, because I went through something really stark, I decided to really go for it. I decided to take risks and be really intentionally unabashed with my writing, especially regarding sex and grief and trauma and suicidal ideation. I thought if I'm going to write something, I'm not going to hold back. Um, um, one never knows really how much time we have here, so I thought I'll just go for it. So I really put in a lot of time working through pieces that were very difficult for me to feel. And I didn't want to save the reader from the more disturbing aspects of myself and tried to sublimate those parts into art. And the more I did that, the more I realized the better I felt about what had occurred to me and the more balanced I felt. Um, I also learned a lot about my process and how I like to work. Like, for instance, I like to work really late at night and I can be quite obsessive. And one of the things that I also like to do when I work, I like to have another poet as my companion. So I'd often like read Anne Carson or Eduardo Corral at one point, or Gloria Anzaldúa, and these people became kind of like my sort of like my friend throughout these times, and they hold the bar really high. So that's sort of what I learned about my process as someone who is writing poetry, is like I'm not the first one to actually engage in this art form, and I really wanted to make sure that um, that I was coming from a place where like I was really thinking about skill as well.
I've heard a writer say that, reading someone else's work before beginning their own is like, it's sort of a warm up. It's like an exercise to
Yeah.
begin their own writing, which I really think is interesting.
Hmm.
Um, to talk a little further about your editorial process with this book, so I understand that you worked with Brecken Hancock, who's the
Yes.
editor on your book.
Hmm.
And I guess I want to know what that experience was like for you and like, how did it grow you as a writer?
Brecken was amazing. I knew, I studied Brecken when I took a course, actually, Sarah Peters. She wrote 1998 or 1994, and I become a delight to my enemies. So one of the poems that we studied was a poem from Broom Broom by Brecken. And I was like, who is this person? And I think I like Instagram DM'd her afterwards. And later, when Jay and Hazel asked who I wanted to work with, like I immediately knew I wanted to work with Brecken. And Brecken, I told Jay and Hazel to warn me that she was intense, and I was like, yes, that's what I need. But like Brecken was intense, but she's not was she's so warm and generous, and that's why she's intense, because she gives so much back. And my work is a lot better because of Brecken, and she really helped me kind of like, sometimes when you write, you just sort of like write without knowing structure, and it becomes more of like a, there's like a spirit that takes over. But Brecken kind of helped me organize my writing and helped me think a lot about what my intent actually was. So, and English isn't my first language, so there were a lot of grammatical errors that I would never have been able to catch because English is not my first language. And um, Brecken was like such a huge mentor for me during that time in my life, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for Brecken.
Yeah, that's so valuable to have that in an editor, and that harmonious, that working relationship with an editor that you trust is such an important part of writing, and especially a book that's so personal.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you had this positive experience.
Yes. Thanks.
You have a poem in the book called "Report on Phantompains,"
Yes.
and you describe the different kinds of phantom pains. Um, You've also chosen that as the title of your collection. Can you tell us a little bit about what Phantom Pains means to you?
Yeah, so Phantompains has a double meaning. So it literally refers to the pain amputees feel because our brains don't register that our limbs aren't there. So, when I was in the hospital, I would feel like ankle pain, but my ankles weren't there. And, or I'd feel a lot of nerve pain. And this is also a type of phantom pain as well. There might just be nerve pain, but um, so there's that kind of like literal phantom pain. And then there's the kind of metaphorically speaking phantom pain, which would be, um, you know, some kind of like a feeling that, well, I mean, the word would be suffering. So the feeling of suffering and not having anyone kind of notice it, or not having anyone know that you're actually suffering. And even you yourself might not even know that you're suffering or why you're suffering. So this feeling of suffering becomes phantom to others, or a phantom to you. And um, I like the word phantom for this book as well, because I do have 5 cautionary tales that pivot around sort of like these lower level kind of like mythical creatures or monsters
Mm.
from the Philippines. And I thought this is a really nice way to also reflect that this book contains these stories, and it also contains um, like pain and suffering, the pain and suffering that I felt um, from being so removed from my own body and even my own experience, and being far away from home. So I thought, oh man, like this is a really cool title. I think this is going to be the title of my book.
It's absolutely striking. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I guess I have one last question for you about
you.
your influences and your inspirations. What outside of other books and writers do you think inspires your poetry or art?
Well, I think people who really speak directly with candor and audacity really inspire me. I say that because what I'm writing about is really hard, and to put it out there in the world and to know that people are going to read it is also quite like frightening to me. Like having my mom or my dad read some of my poems, which are quite like sexual in nature, like that's quite scary for me. And also wondering what people are going to think about me afterwards. So I think about, in particular, someone like James Baldwin or Fran Lebowitz and how they just go for it. They speak with a lot of truth and energy, and aren't sorry. They're not sorry for speaking in such direct and almost striking ways that make the other person like question their own beliefs. So these are sort of the type of people that really inspire me to go for it.
Yeah, fearlessness,
Yes.
it's really like an admirable quality, both in people and in writing. So I absolutely understand that. Um, Thank you so much, Therese, for taking the time to chat with us today, and for all your candor
Oh,
and your openness. Is really appreciated. Phantom Pains comes out March 31st from Book Hug Press. You can pre-order from All Lit Up or from bookhugpress.ca, or you can purchase from your local independent bookstore. You can find Therese on Twitter at Beyond Therese. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and we hope you enjoy this interview.
thanks, Mandy. And you can also find me on Instagram. I'm more active on Instagram.
Oh, okay,
At,
perfect. What's your Instagram handle?
it's at Leche, so LECHE _Flan, FLAN __.
Perfect. There you have it.
Yes, thanks, Mandy, so much. I appreciate this.
Thank you.